everyone! I've finished all 24 of my little granny squares, so I thought I'd show you how I'm going to join them. I've made a little sample up here out of 4 of the squares. I'm going to undo this so I can use these squares in the full-size blanket. But I just wanted to show you first what it looks like once it's done. So this is a combination of 2 different methods. The first is a continuous granny square join, which you can find lots of videos on YouTube for. I will link a couple of the ones I like down below. And the second one is called the PLT Join As You Go, and that is designed by Cypress Textiles. You can find her on Instagram and her website, which I'll also link down below. So the things I like about this: the continuous join means that you get all of your squares joined in one joining color, and the whole thing, there's only 2 ends. Isn't that great? There's only 2 ends, so you're not going around each square individually. There's just a continuous join to join all the squares up together. The PLT Join As You Go I like because it creates this nice little braid type join between each squares. It's really neat, and it's really nice. So this is the back of the join part. It's pretty neat as well, and not that obvious as a back. So there we go, there's my little sample. What I've done for these squares, if you've been taught how to make granny squares, perhaps you do a chain between each cluster of double crochets. Now I'm using US terms, so it's a US double crochet or a UK treble crochet. You might do a chain between each one of these little clusters. I'm not certain if it'll work out the same for this tutorial, but it might. I've also turned each row, so you can see, perhaps you can see, this is the front of the stitch on this first row, and then this is the back of the stitches on the next row. This is the front on the 3rd row and the back on the 4th row. And so then I'm going to keep alternating, and so I'll have the front of the next row on this side facing you. Yeah. So yeah, once again, front, back, front. To do that, I've turned each row. This does 2 things. It means that there's not an obvious front and back to your granny square. Obviously, once you put the join in, it's slightly more obvious, but they're still pretty similar. And the second thing is, if you are making really big granny squares, it stops. Sometimes you can get kind of a tilt. So if you've got a big granny square like this and you crochet all around and round without turning your work, sometimes your granny square can be like this, and then you've got a little bit of a tilt from the middle squares just because of the way crochet works. Whereas if you're turning your work each row, your center will always be square to your outside. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, so I'm going to show you my layout for my blanket and how we're going to join it. So I've got all my squares laid out. I've just got these ones set up here so you can see what they look like together. I will undo that before I start the full continuous join so that it's all one continuous join together. So I've got my squares laid out. What you want to do is make sure all of your squares are laid out the same way. I've got mine so that the final row is the back is facing up, so that when the next row is worked, it will be opposite. So the front will be facing up, as the front of the stitches are always facing you as you work them. It's only going to be a small one, but you'll get the idea if you want to make it for a bigger one. So we're going to start up in this top corner, and I will work across this top of this first square and then turn the corner as per usual and work down that same square. And then what we're going to do is jump over to this next square and work up the same side, joining to the first square. So we're going to join those 2 squares together and then work along the top side of that one, and then again the same down this side of the square, then jump over to the next square and join those 2 together along there, work along that top, same down that side, join them together, working up this side of this square, work across the top, work down this side, up this side of this square, joining those 2 together, across the top, down this side, up that side, across the top, down this side, and then work all the way along the bottom of these squares, and then jump over this one and do the same for this whole row until you get to the very end. So we'll finish there, and then we'll already have it outside on this side and across the top, so we just need to work all the way along the bottom and up the side, and then we can add whatever sort of border we like. So I'll show you how I'm going to do this. So the way I draw my yarn is I insert the hook into that corner. I like to start in the corners, it makes the chains a bit less obvious. Hold that down there so I can crochet over it. And chain 3, 2, 3. Then we do 2 double crochets. If you don't know how to do a double crochet, there's plenty of videos on YouTube or instructions online. Just Google how to do a double crochet and you should be able to find it. Now some people do a chain, you might do a chain here. I'm not doing a chain with these squares, so we just continue and do another 3 double crochets in your next little space. And continue like that up until your corner. So I've got my 3 double crochets in the corner. So what I'm going to do is chain 2 and then continue around the corner as I would for any other row and do another 3 double crochets in that same corner space. And continue right to the next corner. Okay, so I've got my 2 sides worked, up that side and across this side. So this is the way it was when it was on the floor. So I'm going to join my next square. So to do that, this is where both the continuous join method and then in a moment where the PLT join comes in. Oops. So I've got that 3 double crochets. I'm going to chain 1 and then make sure you've got the correct side up of your next square the same way as this one, and I'm going to double crochet into this corner space, and then this is where the PLT part comes in. What you want to do is take out your hook, insert it into the corresponding stitch on the first square, and insert it also into that loop that you've just made and bring it up. And do another double crochet into that corner space. Take your hook out of that loop and insert it into the next stitch on the previous square and through that loop. Just pull it up through the stitch and then do another double crochet. So I've just adjusted my setup here so that you can hopefully see what I'm doing a bit better. It's a bit easier for me to work with. So yeah, once again, you've just done the 3 double crochets and you want to take your hook out of that loop there, insert it into the corresponding stitch on the other square, put it back in that loop and pull that loop through the stitch. So this is what we have so far. These 2 little clusters joined on both squares, and we're going to continue into this space. So double crochet into that space. Pull up your loop and take out the hook. Insert the hook into the corresponding stitch and through that loop again, pull the loop through. Do another double crochet. Continue. Take the hook out of the stitch, put it in the other one and pull the loop through. Okay, so now we have those first 2 joined, and we're going to continue all the way along, joining each stitch up to there, and then I'll show you how to do the corner. Okay, so I've crocheted all the way along, joining each stitch to its corresponding stitch by pulling up that loop through it after I've made the stitch. What I'm going to do at this corner, normally at a corner I would do chain 2, like I did over here, but instead I'm going to chain 1 and then take the hook out and put it into that chain 2 space that was made by chaining 2 at that corner. Put it back through that loop, pull the loop through, do 1 more chain, and then continue around as per normal. So 3 double crochets in each space. So there's my first 2 squares. I worked across here as a normal granny square, down this side as a normal granny square, up this side, joining these 2 together with the continuous and PLT join, then along this side. Now I'll work down this side as I did over here, and then I'll move on to the next square and join that up just the same. So working up there to join and then across, and then I will show you once I've finished that row of 6 squares once they're all joined together. Okay, so you can see here I finished my first row of 6 squares, working around each square on the top and the sides but not the bottom, and joining them up with the PLT join along here, which I will give you a refresher on shortly. Then I'm going to work all the way along the bottom here, and I'm going to show you how I make this corner part look like it's an actual corner of a granny square rather than just crocheting straight across. Okay, I also just wanted to mention before I continue, this is for right-handed. If you are left-handed, you will need to kind of flip the whole thing over so that you work in the opposite direction to get the same result. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So I've chained 2 like I do for my corners, and then I'm going to work across to the other corner of this square. So I've got to the corner, I've just worked my 3 US double crochets or UK treble crochets, and I'm going to join it up with the edge just here. So I'm going to do 1 chain, and then somewhere between, I'm going to attempt to get into the chain that I made here earlier. It's hard to see where it is, but you want to just get into the space between the 2 stitches there somewhere and do a slip stitch. So there we go. There's a slip stitch, and then chain 1, and then 3 double crochets into this next space. So there you go, there's a fairly straight corner there. It looks like 2 normal grannies just joined up together. So what we're going to do is just continue just like this, normal and that funny corner, all the way along your 6 squares or however many squares you have in your row. So you can see I've worked all the way along the bottom of this row of squares, and then we're just going to continue as before on around this next row, joining them up as you go. The only difference is, up here we just crocheted normally along. When we do the top of these squares, of course we'll have to join them to this row here. So we're going to start on joining our next row. So I chain 1, and I find it works pretty well if you just have them flat next to each other. Something to look out for though is you want this to be nice and tight so that it doesn't get all loopy. You do that double crochet there, pull up the loop, and then we're going to turn this around so that that's away from us. So insert the hook into that first, well, or last double crochet on the previous square, pull up the loop, do another double crochet, pull up the loop, and bring that through that second stitch, do your third double crochet, and pull out that loop, and hopefully you can see there the hook, it's going through the top of that double crochet, that third one of the cluster, and we've just made the third one of this cluster. So you're kind of joining corresponding stitches. And we just continue like that all the way on this side. And yeah, once again, something else to look out for. When you're starting a new cluster, especially with the PLT join in this stitch, you don't want your next stitch to be too loose, otherwise this little bit here will hang out too much and it will be really obvious. Whereas you can see, you can't see them too much, but yeah, if the stitch is made really loosely, it'll stick out. This one does stick out slightly more than the others, but they're pretty subtle only because I've made an effort to make those stitches nice and tight. Okay, so once again I've gotten to the corner here. Now I like my corners to be really neat, so that's why I'm doing it this way. I'm going to chain one, take the hook out, insert the hook into this gap on this corner, and bring up my loop, and then I won't worry about attaching it over there. I think that'll make it too bulky. So I've chained one again, and then I'm going to continue working on the other side of my corner. Okay, so that's our corner done. So we're going to work down there and then join this side up just the same, and I'll show you what to do once we get to this corner as well, and then you should be right to continue joining the rest of the blanket. So this should be the last part you need to know before you can join your whole blanket of granny squares together. So I've gotten to this corner, I've done my 3 trebles and joined them using the PLT join into the corresponding square. So I'm going to chain one, pull that through the corner of this square next to it, the one I've been joining to here, and then I'm going to chain again and pull that through this other square, the one I'm going to be joining the next side to. So we don't join to this one, it's just not really necessary. And then we work a double crochet into this same space, and don't forget to continue with your PLT join, inserting the hook into the corresponding stitch for these 3 double crochets. And that's that corner done. So that should be everything you need to know to finish the rest of the blanket. The PLT join as you go is a bit fiddly, but it's great once you get the hang of it, and I really like the final look of this lovely little braided join, and it's really neat. So yeah, there you go. I'll show you my finished blanket once that's all done. Good luck. So I've joined up all 24 of my squares in a continuous join, so there'll be only 2 ends to weave in. I'm going to put a border on it as well at some point when I get around to it. It's a bit of a funny ratio at the moment just because of the 4x6 squares, but hopefully I can fix that up a little bit with a border. So each one of these 24 squares is unique, and that's how many unique squares you can make with 4 rounds and 4 colours. Is 24. And I found a really helpful website which has charts for how many squares you can make with however many colours and however many rounds you want to do. Say for example you want to make circles with 3 rounds and you've got 7 colours, it'll tell you how many unique circles you can make, which is pretty cool. If you'd like to continue watching my videos, click over here to watch some more, or click here to subscribe to get more in the future. Anyway, in the meantime, keep crafting. And in case you couldn't tell, I dyed some of my hair purple. It's a bit subtle, I like it. If I've got my hair down you can barely tell, but yeah.